Hi everyone and welcome to this demo. We got these pears on pastel matte paper using mostly soft pastels with a few pastel pencils. I'm working on the light maize color here, which is like a light yellow, and using a mixture of hard and soft pastels. I got some Blue Earth, some Mount Vision, some Unison, and Sennelier. You can see very messy in with the background, but building up those layers, everything is going to soften. The pastel mat can handle all those layers. Every layer that I put on the paper is very thin. I don't apply a lot of pressure, and I'm not putting a lot of pigment on that paper. So it's taking a few layers for the pigment to start moving around. Here you can see things are looking a little bit smoother. I'm using a beautiful color, Venetian red from Mount Vision, which is like a beautiful dusky pink. And I've got a lighter version of that which I'm using in the lit side, and then a darker version of that which I'm using in the shadow. Now this is true to color. I don't know what was wrong with my camera, but the first part of this video it was too blue. This is true to the real colors. So you can see it's like a dusky, pinky, peachy pink is what I want to say, not pinky, well, I don't know. So here we go, coming in with some pastel pencils as well as this little stylus. For my colored pencil drawings, I use a stylus to indent the paper so that when you go over with colored pencil, it will leave the areas you indented white. And I thought, hey, let's see if this works on pastel matte. Now the technique does work on pastel matte, but obviously, the more layers of pastel you put on there, it's going to disappear. And it disappears quite quickly because pastel pigment, it's laying on a lot of pigment in one go compared to a colored pencil. So it is filling that gap that you initially made, well, I initially made. But anyway, it's fun to do, and I still use a technique here and there with my leaves. So the leaves in the reference photograph have a lot more blue content in them, but I'm going for yellow, more of a yellow green in the leaves because there's a lot of yellow in the pears and they're like a yellowy green. So I decided, hey, let's create some harmony and let's just go with some yellow greens in the leaves as well. Now it would completely work if your greens were more blue. Green and pink is just such a beautiful combination, works really well together whether you go for more of a blue green or whether you go for more of a yellow green. So bringing out my trusty Senneliers, that very dark swampy green you just saw me lay down. That's my trusty 155 bronze green deep from Sennelier. Absolutely love that color. It's a very dark yellow green, which is quite difficult to find in pastels. I find your yellow greens are trickier. They're always too bright. Not too swampy, and I find the more swampy yellows work really well for realism when you're creating leaves. So I used a lot of Unison. Unison do phenomenal yellow green earths is the range of their yellow greens, just really so just looks really good with foliage. So here coming in some pastel pencils. At the minute I've really been enjoying laying in a foundation of the subject with some pastel pencils. I find like I can get the values down quite quickly. You can see it's looking very messy, and it's very quick. It's almost like I'm just sketching in the values and a bit of the color just to see if I'm happy with the overall shape, if I'm happy with the values, and if I'm happy with the colors. Then if I'm happy, I'll come back in over with a pastel stick. So here you can see me using my yellow-green earths from from Unison. And then just mapping out the shape with this dark ochre. I decided to make that pear a little bit bigger because the pears I had were looking a little bit skinny and I wanted them to be a little bit more plump. So that's what I'm doing there. And pastel pencils are great because they're so easy to rub out. If you make a mistake on the pastel mat with a pastel pencil, it's just so easy to correct. Another reason I love working on pastel mat is for that reason. You can really erase and get rid of things quite easily. I do work in soft layers, or I should say light pressured layers, so that makes correcting mistakes much easier. So at the moment, I'm actually doing a piece on Sennelier Le Carte, and I like that paper. But I have to say, I keep coming back to Pastel Matte for those reasons. Fixing mistakes is so easy. There's not a lot of pastel dust fallout, because I really don't like that. So I'd say like Pastel Matte is absolutely my go-to paper. So quite important and part of the look, and I've been doing quite a bit of a series where you've got some fruit hanging in some strong sunlight, and it's creating a shadow on like a colorful wall. I just find it so much fun. So the important thing is you've got to, in terms of painting the shadows, you've got to think the shadow is just the wall, but some of the light being blocked out. So it's a darker version of the wall. So if I went in and I made this way too brown or way too purple, it might be a bit jarring. And I mean, of course, if that's what you want to do, it's art, you can do whatever you want. But just sometimes you've got to think when you're painting realistically, the shadow's just a darker version of whatever the surface that the shadow's been cast onto. In this case, it's a dusky pink wall. So you're going to see some of those pinks coming through the wall. So that's why I've got my Venetian red in the light, but it's a lighter value, and then I've got my Venetian red in the dark. I did also add like a dusky purple color, just to darken down the shadow a bit more. That was also Mount Vision. And I'm making sure I've got nice crisp edges for my shadow, because when something like this, in this instance, when you've got these pears hanging on the wall and you've got some strong light on there, that shadow is gonna have really crisp edges. So making sure my edges are nice and crisp. So I had a little bit of trouble with these two pairs that I'm working on at the moment. Something wasn't quite working. In the reference photo, it wasn't really clear. Now this reference I created using an AI, Midjourney is the name of the AI program. So you'll find often when you're creating with AI, there's going to be a few mistakes that you need to correct. Took me a bit of a while to figure it out, but what I did is the pair, I pushed the one pair more back and I brought the other pair more forward. So that corrected it looking quite funny, and now it's looking much better. So just putting in some details here with my pastel pencils, the skin, those little dotty bits that pears have, just using a mixture of a reddish brown, more of an orange brown, and more of a neutral brown and a dark brown. So making different colored dots on the pear skin, fixing up with a Q-tip, or you can use a paper tortillon where your fingers are just too big to get into. And amping up of course, the brightest highlight on there is Sennelier White. And then going round, just like I said, I was talking about edges earlier, going around the painting and just cleaning up and fixing and perfecting those edges, because you've got such contrast in this. It's really important that those edges are nice and neat. So this usually takes quite a bit of time actually. When I've got pigment on every inch of the paper, I then go around and I perfect any lines, or sometimes some of the green, from the leaves has gone into my background. I've got to fix that. Sometimes this is the part that can take the longest actually. But if you've enjoyed this, you can check it out in real time over on my Patreon. I'll leave a link in the description below. But that's it for this one. I hope you have enjoyed this, and I shall see you next time. Bye for now.